on the next item. So
you are live now, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Monica. Okay, so we'll now move to agenda item 10, which is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Safeguarding Children Partnership Board annual report for 2019 to 2020. Nice to see Joe Proctor here, who's the head of service for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Safeguarding Partnership Boards. Joe, over to you to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. Can I just check in the first instance that people can hear me, because I've also had lots of technical issues today. I've borrowed my son's laptop in the hope that it might be better than my Peterborough Chromebook. So apologies for the fact it came up with Dan sprawled across earlier. I'm not fine. Dan, I am Joe. So apologies for that. Thank you for inviting me to the virtual meeting. As ever, every year we come and present to you for information our annual safeguarding report. As ever, it's quite retrospective as well. So the document that we're referring to today is almost a year old, really, because it ran from April 19 to the 31st of March 2020. So I will do some highlights on these, but I also thought if it would be interesting for people, I can just do a very brief summary on what we've done as a result of COVID as well, which is probably more a bit up to date for people, if that would be helpful.
Yep.
So we have to bring the report to yourselves for information purposes. It has gone through our independent scrutineer, who is Dr. Russell Waite, who some of you may well know, and he has confirmed that the report is compliant and does meet with all the statutory information that we need to contain. So we are compliant with the annual report itself. Last year, members confirmed that they liked the more concise version of the report that we'd produced, and so we've stuck with that kind of format again this year. So in terms of the areas of priority that the Safeguarding Board has focused on, and this within 2019, and in fairness, we've actually continued these for 2020 into 2021 as well, because they are large areas of work. The 4 areas that we've particularly focused on, and this doesn't mean it's at the detriment of everything else, we have looked at other areas as well, but our main 4 areas of work that we've focused on have been around child neglect, child sexual abuse, child criminal exploitation, and learning from case reviews. Those have been our 4 main areas. And the report does highlight some of the work that was carried out in terms of those 4 areas that kind of we looked at. One of the things I'd particularly like to draw your attention to is around child criminal exploitation and the mapping process that has been developed and put in place. This has been really, really successful, and it's also shown some collaborative working that we've undertaken with our community safety partnership colleagues and also our locality policing in attempt to be able to really hone down in individual localised areas where there may be issues around child criminal exploitation and to give a localised response to that. The other group that we've worked really, really closely with that is our schools. So that mapping exercise is very much driven by schools saying, we think we've got a problem, we've got an issue. We come in, we have a look at it with other colleagues and then come up with a kind of a plan around that particular area and those particular individuals that are involved. And that's actually been just passed by the Home Office for us as national good practice. That's been a really good piece of work, but also some really good joint working that we've done over the last 12 months or 24 months now. The case reviews, as you've previously had them referred to when we've come to speak to you as serious case reviews, they have now moved to being referred to as child safeguarding practice reviews. The main change that has had, which has had an impact on us as a partnership, has been around a process that they've brought in, which is called a rapid review process. And basically, the process now works in a way that if an agency refers to us to say that they think there is a child or young person who has been killed or seriously abused, and we need to have a look at it as a unit, as a partnership, we now have 15 days from the point that that information comes into us to gather all of the information from the agencies, to pull those agencies together, to have a discussion around that, and then to go back to government to confirm what our local kind of responses around that, whether or not we think we should be doing a review, and if that should be a localised review or a national review. And that has been quite a significant difference for people, because 15 days is not that long when you're trying to get agencies to go through this considerable amount of detail and to get everybody's diaries together to come back and meet with us. So that has presented some challenges. We have revised our forms, our guidance, our processes, and that's an ever evolving process in terms of actually we're just tweaking them again now actually to try and make them more manageable for people. And I think we're now in a place where we've probably got that process embedded. But if I'm being really honest, at the point that this annual report was produced, it was a very, very new process. And for us, the same as everybody else around the country, probably struggled a little bit in terms of just kind of moving to that new transition. But we are there now. And as I say, we are evolving, we are continuing to work with that. What it has also allowed us to do, actually, which has been a good move to the child safeguarding practice reviews, is how the process in which we undertook those child safeguarding practice reviews was quite prescriptive when there were serious case reviews. We've now been pretty much left to do them how we want to do them. So the process that some of you may have been used to seeing, where you had independent management reviews from agencies, overview authors, kind of a report, we don't have to do them that way anymore. They're up to us how we want to undertake them. And that also has been a really good opportunity for us to kind of trial different methods, to be able to do reviews in more real time, because, you know, that learning does come when you've got those practitioners together in a group and they start to unpick situations. And we've also had a few cases that have come through as well, which have actually been good practice examples where we've had some really good practice that's come out of those case reviews, which has been really, really heartening. So that's kind of has been a significant change in terms of our case reviews. It's also, I think, to our credit as a partnership and to all our agencies, including the local authority, that our process that we use for embedding our learning from case reviews has actually been highlighted as national good practice in the latest government triennial review of serious case reviews. And as a result of that, we've had quite a few other partnership boards around the country contacting us to say, can we look at how you're doing things? Because I think that's the importance, really, isn't it? If you're doing the review, it's got to make a difference to practice. So I was really quite heartened to see that. Done lots of work around lived experience of the child, or voice of the child, as some of you may know it as referred to, across the partnership. And I know that we're not on our own here, including the local authority, health, police, lots of agencies have done work around lived experience of the child. And I can say that in more recent case reviews and quality assurance activity that we've undertaken, we are seeing a movement now where we are seeing things much better recorded and that voice of the child coming through. So that is definitely an improvement that we've seen, and that's been since the publication of the report that you've got in front of you, because obviously it is so old. In terms of the quality assurance activity, obviously we've continued with that as we do, undertaking the audits, and in fact we are in the process at the moment of doing our large Section 11 audit, which is our statutory responsibilities audit, that's kind of one of the main pieces that we've done. But also we did a really interesting piece of work around sexual abuse and forensic medicals, and as a result of that audit, that has resulted in a change in the pathway for other agencies to be able to refer into the SARC for sexual abuse forensic medicals, which has been a really positive step forward as well. The training continues to be delivered. I think that's a real major part of our work, really, and a real strength is our multi-agency development programme. At the point that this was delivered, we delivered training to 1,958 people across the children's workforce in 2019. Obviously, COVID had a massive effect on that, as our training had been delivered face-to-face, and that was something that we couldn't and we still can't do. So we were very, very aware that we needed to put something in place quite quickly that would allow professionals and volunteers and communities to be able to access safeguarding information and kind of training quite quickly. So we produced, which some of you may or may not have seen, a suite of what we call sways. And these are briefings. They generally run at about 20-minute briefings. We've got them on a whole suite of subjects now, which are basically pre-recorded PowerPoint presentations with audio over the top of them. So absolutely, there are some subjects that it would not be appropriate for us to deliver that way, but some of the more basic general training, we've managed to get the kind of a whole suite that people can access at any point in time that they want to from our website. So if you're a night worker, if you're on shift work, And I asked somebody within my unit today how many times those have now been accessed, and they started going live the end of April, and we've now had 10,919 views of those sways. So they have been absolutely phenomenal in terms of the take up that we've got, and in terms of COVID and going forward, absolutely the sways are something that we will continue to do going forward, because they do allow us to get only certain subjects, admittedly, but information out to people that we would never have hit that many people in our normal training. We are now delivering as well face-to-face virtual training, so that has now all started again, but obviously in terms of numbers, there's no way we could begin to meet that number of people. Again, in terms of COVID, we've taken a real kind of lead in terms of some of the social media messaging that's been going out around safeguarding. So I know I've reported to you before in terms of social media and the campaigns that we've run. And we know that the posts at one point were reaching over 30,000 people. So we did get a good take up on those. We really wanted to support our colleagues across the partnership. So we were also dealing with messaging around mental health of children and where to go for support of that. When we were aware that there was the dip in the referrals into social care, that importance of making sure that people still knew to refer and how to refer, and that was still what people needed to do. So we targeted messaging around that. We've also targeted messaging around things like domestic abuse and child sexual abuse. So throughout the pandemic, we've kind of changed that messaging as we've needed to change it. But we are continuing with the COVID messaging and the social media. We also developed COVID resource pages on our website, which was a kind of a one-stop shop for people to be able to access information around safeguarding and COVID, and try to ensure that was kind of geared towards things like scams and online abuse, etc. So that continues to be run. And we work really hard with our voluntary sector and community as well around developing some bespoke training and guidance for community volunteers, because we suddenly found there was an awful lot of people who were put into positions of volunteering that didn't necessarily know about safeguarding and needed to be upskilled around that quite quickly. So we worked with our both Peterborough and Cambridgeshire and our community volunteer sector around trying to ensure that we'd upskilled those workers, and we've still continued with that in terms of going and kind of supporting at various network events and things, and kind of just for some people who are not used to our world, kind of that criteria of what's safeguarding and what isn't, what's early help, what goes into local authority mashes, you know, that's quite a new world for people. So we really worked with them to try and help that and try and smooth that transition. In terms of our meetings have continued throughout. We haven't stopped any of our meetings through the pandemic. And one of the things that's been really important for us is to allow us to have a format where we've been able to bring partners together to ensure that safeguarding is still safeguarding, not is still happening, but people are still safeguarding children throughout the pandemic, and that to kind of just to give us an opportunity really to raise any concerns that people have had, if there's been any issues, any good practice that we might want to continue post-pandemic, and those COVID updates and pressures continue as a standing agenda item on all of our meetings going forward. So that's kind of that's definitely happened. There's been definitely some key pieces of work around kind of appointments for children, and face-to-face appointments for children across the partnership has been one of the things that we've been focusing on recently. So that's a very, very whistle-stop tour. I know that I haven't got very long, and I just wanted to make sure that I filled you in on some of the COVID bits as well. So apologies if I've gone off-piste, but I thought that might be more relevant than things from 2 years ago.
No, that's absolutely really helpful, Jo. Thank you very much. I'll open it up to members now. So I've got Councillor Hoy, followed by Councillor Netsingham.
Yeah, I just wondered, are we allowed to make requests as to things that we would like the board to look into at all?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because the reason I'm asking is one thing I've noticed, and I've only noticed in the sort of last year, is that it's actually quite easy for organisations to set up to offer to volunteer to help people. They don't have to necessarily register as a charity or as a CIC or anything like that. They can offer to volunteer support, and it just worries me about the safeguarding kind of impacts of that, because you don't know who is signing up to be a volunteer and running an organisation like this, and it's difficult because government kind of don't seem to have too much of a policy on it either, because you know, you have to be registered. If you're a charity, you have to be registered with the Charities Commission. But then if you aren't registered as a charity, they don't kind of like look into that. And I just wonder if there's a number of organisations that are potentially slipping through the net. And I just think that's an item might be worth exploring, really.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we've done in the past actually was some guidance really for parents on, if I'm signing my child up to something, what are the kind of things that I should be looking at if we're signing them up? What do I need to be asking for? What areas do we need to be looking at? But absolutely, Councillor Hoy, we can have a look at that. I'm looking at Lou as well, because he's now chairing the Safeguarding Children's Board. So I'm assuming, Lou, that sounds a really reasonable idea to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I suggest Councillor Hoy, you just let Joe know what it is particularly. We can ask to have a look at what we can and can't do in relation to that.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Lucy, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and for your very detailed explanation of lots of the things that you've been doing this year. I particularly wanted to focus on the on what you were talking about to do with case reviews. There have been a couple of somewhat high profile and very tragic court cases in Cambridgeshire in the last year, one involving serious sexual abuse and the other involving the death of a child. I'm interested to know what the process is in the new system for those case reviews going forward. I know that one of them, there wasn't a serious case review for that. And I'm just slightly concerned about the new system is less rigorous than the old one in terms of people potentially marking their own homework.
Okay, so one of the cases which I think you're referring to that was in the news in the last week or so is the subject of a case review, and we're undertaking that at the moment. The case review process has to pause sometimes to allow criminal proceedings to take place. So we've had to wait until the conclusion of that court case, and then we can kind of continue with it at the moment. What I would say is that there still has to be an independence to the process. So regardless of how we run that, it has to have independent scrutiny and oversight. So what it does allow us to do is in those cases where and they do come in, where you look at a case and you know very early on, actually this is as a result of X, Y and Z, it allows us to progress that case relatively quickly, because they can be quite simple, straightforward cases in some instances. Some of them absolutely are far more complex. So what it allows us to do is to have that flexibility to be able to either actually we need to do this in more in depth, we need to really look at a lot more agencies, or actually this is a short, sharp piece of work because we know that it's a particular area that we need to look at. But regardless of how we run them, they still have to go through a panel. They still have to be independently scrutinised and looked at and have an independent element. So none of that will have changed. And locally, we're really all of the partnership here is very open to being transparent and saying, actually, this is about learning, and if it's something we need to look at, then we'll look at it. So I would say locally, we have not gone as far as some other areas in terms of we've kept some of that kind of process that we had before that allowed us to look in more detail at cases. But there is always going to be an independent scrutiny of that case review, and it always has to have an independent element.
Can I just
answer the question?
It is very helpful, but there is but actually part of my question is about so the second case that I was talking about, there is going to be a case review, and that's really helpful. The first one, I think there wasn't, and part of my question is about when there is a decision not to have a case review in spite of something having gone wrong, and who gets to make that decision.
So that decision is made. So case reviews are made when a child is deemed to have either died or to have suffered significant harm and serious injury. And it's the serious injury bit that often people interpret differently. So the decision as to whether or not a case review takes place is made. It comes to a panel of people make the decision as to whether or not there is whether or not it is the recommendation is to go forward with a case review or not. And we have to put that into government, and government can turn around and say, actually, we disagree with you. We think you should be doing a case review, but we haven't had that happen to date. So governments still have the oversight of whether or not we do undertake a case review.
So the case that I was talking about, the first case,
Yeah.
my understanding was that there had not been a case review, even though there was very evidently serious harm. And it's possible that means it was carried out by the review was carried out by somebody else. And it's also possible that Lou can help with some information. But if there is serious harm, then there should be an assumption that there will be a case review.
Providing that there is learning that needs to come from the case, yes.
So who gets to decide about whether there's learning that should come from the case?
That comes through the panel meeting. There's a panel meeting, a multi-agency panel, serious case or case review panel, which the cases come to. They're then
does that panel have to have those independent people on it?
Yes, it's chaired by an independent person.
Okay.
Do you want to come back on this, Lou? Have you got anything to add? I can see your hands up. Simon's gone again, by the way, which is why you've got me. He's in and out today.
You're doing a great job, Sam.
So so just to reiterate what Joe said there, the basic points around this is whether there's likely to be learning from a case, what the nature of the injury is. And that decision is made by a panel that's chaired by somebody independently, and we do have to feed back to government. The whole point of the new arrangement is to try and make things happen when they do need to happen, to make things happen a bit more quickly, actually. So some of the reports, so if you look at the reports that Joe's referenced in the last year's annual report, they've done under the previous system and actually relate to events that took place quite far back again from there. And one of the key issues for practitioners is so for example, in the first case they referenced, which was in court recently, one of the things that will absolutely happen is a practitioners event, and that's one of the best ways of helping and supporting practitioners to learn from things that may have been able to have been done better or differently in relation to the case. And obviously, to be able to do that, you need to do that as soon as you can after things have happened. If it's a long delay, then it's less effective, and that is the focus. So in that case, for example, the decision to hold a local safeguarding review was agreed with by the national panel. If the national panel has a particular interest or thinks that there may be some particular learning that's relevant across the board, then the national panel might ask for a national review.
Okay, so that's all helpful. But the first case that I was talking about, I mean, the one that was longer ago, not the most recent one, which is going for a case review, there was a decision that there was that would not go for a case review. And the thing that I'm particularly interested in is that decision was made by the whole panel with a large number of agencies around the table and chaired by an independent person.
Yes, that's the process that's followed, and the key around that was the likelihood of there being learning.
Yeah, I understand that.
You know, if what's happened in a particular case is that agencies have received information, have acted and done something about it quickly, and there isn't anything to indicate that, you know, perhaps they haven't shared information with one another or they've really missed things that they should have seen, then that panel is likely to endorse the fact that there wouldn't be a review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think, Simon, are you back now?
Yeah, I am. Sorry, it's a bit, yeah, it's ridiculous. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I looked for, and I'm sure you've had this in past reports, are statistics. I mean, I'm particularly interested in, you know, whether we're winning. So have there been fewer cases of child neglect, child sexual abuse and child criminal exploitation? I mean, are these things that we're influencing? Are we reducing the incidence there? And I'm sure in the past that we have had statistics that provide that information. Now, maybe I've missed them somewhere, but I couldn't find any. And it just would be useful to know, you know, whether in fact we are having an impact on these clearly very serious areas of where children do need safeguarding.
No, you haven't missed them. It was something we were asked to remove last year. So we were asked to not to put the statistics in. So we've removed them this year. And because it's a public document, we've tried to make it as kind of easy to read as possible. But that's why you can't find them, because they aren't in here this year. Or for this report. If people would like them to be back in again for the next years, we can arrange that. That's not a problem.
Well, two things. One is you could put them in an appendix so that geeks like me who really want to know what's going on rather than a load of kind of, waffle, can actually access them, which I think would be very useful. And I mean, if you want something to be easy to read, then you should change the format, because it's absolute hell to read this double paneled format on a computer, and hardly better in real text. It's one of the most inefficient ways of presenting data, because your eye has to keep going backwards and forwards very, very quickly, and it's very tiring. But the main point is about statistics, because unless we see statistics, we have no idea whether the Safeguarding Board is doing its job, whether it is safeguarding, or whether, hundreds of children are slipping through the net.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that point.
Okay, Lou, would you like to just come back in there?
Yeah, first of all, I completely agree with you, Joan, about the formatting. I don't like two columns on it's really hard to read on a laptop. So I would endorse that. Just in terms of the statistics, I guess the worry, we can certainly put them in, but of course, interpretation of statistics is another thing. And so, for example, we have seen over the last 12 months an apparent increase in the number of children who are vulnerable to child criminal exploitation. What we've probably seen is much greater awareness because of what the Safeguarding Children Board has done. And that therefore means that partners are referring children in who they're concerned about child criminal exploitation. And that's a good thing, but often can be seen as, actually we're failing because more children are at risk of child exploitation. So that would be the only thing I would say about statistics. They do need interpretation sometimes in this area.
Well, you could always provide a brief explanation.
Maybe I'm sure Joe will take the feedback and ultimately think about how it's presented next time, and ultimately provide a link if necessary so that you can actually refer to that. I mean, obviously the Safeguarding Board itself, their meetings are minuted as well, so there's always that. Go onto the website and look on the website about what's happening and the data that sits behind every meeting. So, and they sit every quarter, Joe, Lou, is it?
It's just moved. It's literally just moved since January to termly, but it was quarterly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So points made, and ultimately we'll try and improve it for the next time round. Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, I think it was actually me that said about them being removed last year, because I think statistics in this area are actually a bit pointless. The reason being twofold. First of all, like Lou said, if you have a report saying, oh, we've got an increase of children, having being open to sexual exploitation, that doesn't necessarily mean there's necessarily a problem. Perhaps we actually did great work identifying the numbers, so it could be seen in a negative way when it's not. And also, if we say that cases of neglect have gone down, it doesn't necessarily mean they've gone down. It means we maybe don't know about them. And what my worry is if we're saying on a document X number of children are being subject to neglect or sexual abuse, that doesn't actually reflect the true numbers, because if we knew every child that was being abused, we would be obviously taking action. We wouldn't just be reading them in a committee report. So I'm unsure how useful any of these statistics are actually going to be, to be honest.
I reply to that, if you don't have those kinds of figures, then you have no idea where you are. I mean, yes, I worked a lot with statistics. I know there are multiple ways of interpreting them, but you do need to have some way of looking at whether criminal exploitation is going up, and if it's going up, what can we do about it? And the same with sexual abuse and neglect. And unless you have the data, you don't know what you're doing.
Okay. Lou, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I guess I'm sure we can find a happy medium. I mean, I do, I agree with you, Joan. There is, you have to have some benchmark. It is about understanding and having a reasonable interpretation of sometimes what those numbers are telling you. Yeah, I'm sure we can find some sort of happy medium and perhaps have something in an appendix that gives some fundamental measures of where we are.
Okay, I can't see any more members wishing to speak. We're asked to just note this. Just for myself, I just want to pass on my thanks, because I know over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, the Safeguarding Board has evolved and changed, you know, and we've really engaged the partners in this process as well, really. So thanks to yourself, Joe, and to Dr. Russell Waite as well, who's our independent scrutiny officer. So yes, there are points of learning on how it's presented, not actually in the delivery of what we're doing. I think it's just about how we interpret that data set, really, and understand it a little bit better, really. But okay, so we've noted it and commented. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. So we'll move on then.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Agenda item 11, which is the agenda plan. It's just a bit of housekeeping now. So we turn to the last item, the agenda plan, training plan and appointments. Michelle, is there anything to note on the published agenda? Do we need to comment or note anything?
I haven't received any updates from Rashenda, so I think it's as stands.
Yeah, I think myself and the lead members discussed it prior to the committee, and there wasn't anything or no significant changes. And we're just asked to note the training plan and note the committee appointments. So I think we've done that. And then it just forced me to close the meeting. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, the 9th of March. And just Joan, do you want to just come in?
Yeah, we agreed, did we not, that at the March meeting, we were going to have the paper on the Barnwell Hub?
Yes, sorry.
Morning.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, obviously that will get slipped in there. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. We will be looking at a paper in relation to an issue that's at Barnwell. Other than that, I think that's time for us to close. We'll see you at the next CYP meeting on March 9th. Thank you very much to everybody, and
Thank you, Chair.
stay safe.
Thank you.
Cheers.